Welcome back. I've decided to keep the format and cover 3 songs per episode, although we might have 1 or 2 special parts where we go into more detail about very important tracks. As I mentioned in the last video, every Final Fantasy game has at least one standard battle music for random encounters, and this one is no different. The first time we hear this song is during the battles in the Mako reactor. Interestingly, this track also plays during the fights against the optional super bosses at the very end of the game. It's the first standard battle theme in the main series that doesn't begin with the ascending harp arpeggios or the characteristic bass line. Just listen to how Final Fantasy 1 through 6 start. And now 7. I think this shows just how different and new this game was at the time. I mean, it's kinda like making a Star Wars movie and not starting with the opening fanfare. FF7 was the first game on a new generation of consoles. Suddenly there are 3D graphics, cinematic sequences that were amazing for the time, and beautifully painted backgrounds. Why not have a new kind of battle theme as well? At this point, we should probably talk about how these songs are built. Uematsu himself mentions in an interview that his tracks have a relatively straightforward structure, simple parts which are arranged in certain ways. This can be seen in fighting as well. Uematsu writes relatively short parts, which are about 8 to 12 bars long, and then takes these parts and arranges them to form a complete tune. This technique is reminiscent of the way many pop songs are written. At any rate, even though I must have heard this track hundreds of times, I'm still not tired of it. The main melody keeps ascending and kinda gives me the idea of an uphill struggle that I have to best with my party members. This is another track that is even better in an orchestral version. This song was never on any Distant Worlds album as far as I know, but there is a version on the Crisis Core soundtrack as part of the Fulfilled Desire medley. This might be the most famous Final Fantasy track of all time. We can hear it after almost every battle our party wins. There are a few exceptions to this rule, of course, especially during story sequences like the opening and the battle against Genova Life. Much like Prelude, this is one of those melodies that can be found in every Final Fantasy game, and has been around since the very first one. As you can hear, the second part after the fanfare is different than the one in 7. In fact, this part stays the same for the first 6 entries of the series and only changes in this one. In FF7 it has an electronic sound to it and kinda reminds me of the Gold Saucer or the sound a slot machine makes. There are, however, 2 other versions of the Victory Fanfare in 7. And both of them retain the original second part from earlier titles. They can be heard after finishing a chocobo race in the Gold Saucer Race Square. Jackpot, which is played after winning, and Tango of Tears, which is played after losing the race. Of course, this track is a staple of video game music, and I have to say the Final Fantasy VII version might be my favorite. Call me geeky, but it's actually my ringtone. Though my phone is usually on vibrate. I'm not that guy. By the way, check out Cid's victory pose. That's pretty cool. As Cloud breaks through the church roof and survives a pretty improbable fall. Yeah, I don't think so. He is awakened by a girl named Aerith. Or Aerith. Let's go with Aerith. It sounds better, I think. He's lying in a flower bed in the middle of the church. Now, I've checked, and these are the first real signs of nature that we see in the game, and this is reflected in the music. As with Tifa's theme, this track provides some downtime between the more action-oriented scenes in the game. In this way, the game kind of functions like the opposite of a certain kind of blockbuster movie, for instance the superhero genre, where you need an action scene every 30 minutes or so. Instead, we need some breathing space every couple of areas. The most obvious comparison we can draw here is of course Aerith's theme. By the way, not an easy thing to pronounce for me. Well, at any rate, the melodies of these two songs are very close. As you can hear, they are virtually identical, but not fully developed in Flowers Blooming in the Church. And that's a good thing, because of the emotional impact of the track later in the game. No spoiler warning here. If you've played the game, you know the moment, and if you haven't played the game, let me just say it's a very important scene. So, because of how important this moment is, it's essential that we recognize the song when we first hear it in its final form. This is actually something many composers of movie scores do. We can also hear the song in and around Aerith's and Elmyra's home in Sector 5. In conclusion, I think this is a very gentle song, which encapsulates Aerith's selflessness and positivity in the face of everything that's happened to her. And that was it for part 4. Thank you for watching and I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for part 5. Aerith's theme. Should have gone with Aerith.